Have you ever wanted to have the full experience of a key visual novel, but just don't have the time to read it? To get a beautiful ending of an amazing story that will make you bawl your eyes out without having to set aside 50 or 60 hours of your life? Well then, I have the solution for you. It's called Planetarian, a short 2 to 4 hour long visual novel by Key. Planetarian is set in a post-apocalyptic future Earth, where most of humanity is being wiped out by a mix of biological, nuclear, and chemical weapons, as well as killer robots. In this story, we follow a junker, or in other words, a scavenger, who's searching an abandoned city to see if there's anything worthwhile salvaging. While doing so, he stumbles across an old pre-war planetarium, and a robot who works there, Hoshino Yumeme. As strangely, not many people have been visiting planetariums following the apocalypse, the junker is the first guest Yumeme's had in about 30 years, and she's excited to give him a show. Unsurprisingly though, since the projector at the planetarium hasn't been used in 30 years, it doesn't work. At all. The junker offers to fix the projector, and the story runs from there. I know this introduction to the plot is incredibly short, and that's because superficially, not that much happens in the story. I could easily summarize the entire plot in a couple of sentences, but just describing all the events that occur in this story wouldn't be doing it justice. That's because what you really get out of this story is not just the plot, but more the building of a world, its atmosphere, its history, and its harsh realities. Now, this type of description is the kind of thing that would normally send me running for the hills, remembering all the tedious, great works of art I was forced to read back in high school English class, with too much description and too little plot. Planetarian, however, bears no resemblance to that sort of tedium. For one thing, it's concise and complete, and wastes no time on flowery language or obtuse metaphors. Secondly, while there are a few main events in the story, they are interesting ones. Some are really touching, some are funny, and not to spoil too much, but we do get in a battle with an automated mech at one point, which is pretty intense. Finally, the characters are actually really likable. There's two characters in this story, the junker and the robot. There are no pictures of the junker in this visual novel, but just imagine gritty, gruffy McGruffface from any video game you've played recently, and that's probably a reasonable indication of what he looks like. Or, I guess you could look at a picture of him from the upcoming anime adaptation of Planetarian. That works too. Anyways, he's a cynical, tired man who's used to hard living and has little patience. He does have a soft side to him though, and he seems to develop a genuine affection for Yumeme through the course of the story. Yumeme is a consummate chatterbox who loves her work at the planetarium and doesn't seem to understand that the old world has come to an end. She's sweet, innocent, and often a bit goofy, but can also show great moments of depth. She's really quite an interesting mix, as some of her actions are very mechanical and show a lack of rational thought, reinforcing that yes, she is indeed a robot, while at other points, she shows a very real sense of emotion, making her feel just, well, human. I got incredibly attached to her as the story progressed, and her character is one of the main reasons this story works as well as it does. So, why should you read Planetarian? Because it will make you cry. The story does a great job evoking emotion, and given how short the story is, the feels are all the more potent. Seriously, I've read series that are 10 times as long and haven't had as much of an emotional impact as this story did. Less important, but also worthy of praise, are the story's world building and soundtrack. As I already mentioned, Planetarian's text does a great job succinctly creating the dying post-apocalyptic world our protagonists find themselves in, and also developing that world's history. It presents a very interesting look at what would happen if the Earth grows overcrowded and the promises of space exploration fail to materialize. If all the global powers fought over a dwindling pool of resources, what the aftermath would look like. Although pretty darn depressing in that sense, I can respect Planetarian as a good piece of speculative fiction, and not just a crying game that brought manly tears to my eyes. The soundtrack is equally worthy of respect, with music that perfectly fits the story's atmosphere, and a couple of standout pieces that made me cry even harder during the sad moments. It definitely ranks up there as one of my favorite visual novel soundtracks of all time. Now, with all that being said, I can't say this story is for everyone. In fact, I could see a younger version of myself actively disliking this story. A lot of your time in Planetarian will be spent listening to Yumeme and the junker talking to each other, or watching flashbacks to older times. So yeah, it's not always the fastest moving story, with a lot of moments being more thoughtful than exciting. Really, if anything hooks you into the story, it will be the characters in the world, not the plot. Also, I don't think everyone will find the ending satisfying. This story is not the type of thing you'd want to read if you were feeling down and wanted a pick-me-up. Personally, I did enjoy Planetarian a lot, and if you enjoy going through stories that make you cry, this is absolutely the visual novel for you. As for general recommendations, check with your preferences to see if Planetarian is right for you. If crying persists for 24 hours after use, try reading Clanad next. This reviewer takes no responsibility for any further crying that may or may not occur after that point. More seriously though, if you've already read Planetarian or are looking for something similar, I'd try out Chobits. It lacks any of the post-apocalyptic stuff, but it is set in a future Earth, has feels, and is another story with a cute human-like robot. It also has a interesting discussion about the boundaries between being simply a robot and a conscious being, an issue that Planetarian lightly touches on. Anyways, that pretty much wraps up this review. Thanks for listening. Cheers!